Welcome in for another edition of Armchair Quarterback. I'm David Allen and joined as always, Coach Guy Suttle. And sitting in with us again this week, Paul Foster. Each week we talk about our Cleveland County football teams. We'll look ahead to college football with Gardner-Webb and the ACC. And then we'll finish up with a little NFL news and Carolina Panthers. Yeah, go ahead and laugh about that, Coach. But anyway, 3 of the 4 Cleveland County teams in action this past Friday night. So we'll start with that. We'll start with actually, I say they were all in action on Friday night. I'll just say they were all in action this past weekend, 3 out of the 4. As Burns decided to play on Thursday night, I think the initial weather forecast early in the week was we may see some rain on Friday night. So Burns decided to get their game in on Thursday night. Actually ended up not getting really much rain on Friday night. So they would have been fine either way. But Burns and Alexander Central, and this was a game where the Bulldogs had some balance, Coach, but bottom line, once the Bulldogs kind of got the ground game going, the score went from 14-7 to 28-7 pretty quick.
Yeah, and that's what Burns really, really needs to concentrate on. I mean, I like a good ball in the air also, but Burns, it's going to be one of those years where you're gonna feast more on the running game than you are on throwing the pigskin.
Well, Paul, they got 150 yards passing Thursday night, so it wasn't like that the passing game was not available. They were able to move the ball through the air some, but they were just more successful overall once they got the ground game going.
Yeah, you guys are right. They had a good balance this time. You said it 150 or just or nearly that in passing. I think 250 or at least close to it in rushing. And their main guns came through, and I think they really kicked it into gear in the second half, from what I understand.
Really, if you think about it, maybe more of the fourth quarter. Look, I haven't seen a stat sheet, but it looked like they really committed to the run late in the game and really piled up those yards in the fourth quarter. So I go back to Jim Taylor and Chris Norman. Let's run the football. And like I say, passing 150, that's a great mixture. But it was almost like 3 quarters they threw the ball, and 1 quarter they ran.
So it was a 6-0 game at halftime. Burns and Alexander Central traded touchdowns in the third quarter. Then Burns put 2 on the board in the fourth quarter to pull away. There you see the final score, 28-7. Burns improves to 2-2 now on the season. And so, that's a big win because coming off of back-to-back county losses, Burns really needed that to kind of get them back into a good frame of mind going in to conference play. And, of course, we'll talk more about that in our second segment. Crest got a lot of interesting comments over the course of the preseason with losing that Gaffney game, but they picked up Charlotte Catholic, and there was some interesting things happening in that game on Friday night, too. The Chargers pulled that one out, Paul, but they had their hands full.
They had their hands full. What was interesting, and I think Guy talked about it in our show last week, is that you knew with this old-style wing tee that Charlotte Catholic puts on the field that they're going to run, and that's primarily what they want to do. He said if the quarterback, talking about Guy again, goes into the shotgun, they're going to throw. Well, they went to that more than they had all season, and they were very successful. That became the better thing for Charlotte Catholic to hang with Crest and to even take the lead later in the game was the fact that they went through the air and had a lot of success.
And Guy, one of the things you were talking about is I think the quarterback for Catholic was a transfer and, maybe had been a kid that had some success throwing the football and oddly enough chooses to go to Catholic where they primarily run the football, but he was successful a little bit on both cases on Friday night.
Yeah, and it was even a receiver in there too that transferred into Catholic. You don't think about going to Charlotte Catholic so that you can, get catch passes or throw passes. This game was tight. It was probably one of the most exciting finishes of the early season. You can see there on that fumble, that was a vicious hit on the quarterback right there. There's some other vicious hits that come up in this game. I thought it was a really good, hard-fought game, but it was just closer than the Charger faithful one to see. I'm telling you, as one of them, it was a tough ending to this game on a couple of penalties by the referees that certainly would raise some eyebrows through anyone. But it was a good, tough high school football game. Mistakes, a couple of interceptions, or fumble by Crest, some penalties. You can see right here, Charlotte Catholic fumbled on the 1 yard line also. They called a penalty on that.
Paul, obviously one of the things that you learn from a game like this where it's super competitive is, exactly what you got on the field. And again, penalty flags flying there on the highlight package. But, basically an opportunity for Crest to play a very disciplined, good opponent. And even though it was a tight win, as Coach said, that's a win that's going to pay dividends for Crest down as the season goes along, just based on the experience level of nothing else.
I couldn't agree with you more. Some of the final scenes we saw were Catholic being unsuccessful. They did get the flag on the late hit on Crest. It was on 4th down. That gave them a new chance, and then they had one more chance at the end zone. They didn't get it. But David, also another key thing in this game was the fact that Crest quarterback was able, McSwain, he had some mistakes. He had a couple of interceptions and a fumble, which we saw a few minutes ago, but yet down the stretch, he matured. He made some big passes to the receivers he had to hit while pressure was on. Then he had about a 10-yard run to the 1 yard line, and then he went in for the touchdown that would win the game. So Turner McSwain is what helped Crest win that game at the end.
All right, so 27-21, Crest wins that one over Charlotte Catholic. Big win for the Chargers. They advance now, or continue now, 3-0 on the season. And Crest coach Greg Lloyd's return to school and return to home for Coach Lloyd, and he's doing a great job of getting the Chargers prepared as we'll look at their next matchup against Ashbrook in the second segment. Final game of the week, as Kings Mountain was off, the Shelby Golden Lions going to Olympic. I was about to put the jinx on the Golden Lions last week when I said a 1-2 Cleveland County team is better than a 3-0 Charlotte school. I'll take them all day long. And then for 3 quarters, Olympic held the lead in that game, 17-14 early in the fourth quarter. We talked about Burns having a big fourth quarter coach. Shelby had a big fourth quarter as well and was able to pull that game out.
Yeah, and to me, you validated what you said, because a 1-2 Cleveland County team being behind in the fourth quarter or close in the fourth quarter prevailed simply because they'd already had that schedule. They'd already played those tough games. So, hey, come in there, David Allen, for predicting that one and making it look good. And that it did. Those tough games do that for you.
Olympic, a little bit self-destruction too, Paul. I don't know what you heard about the end of that game, but went for it on 4th down deep in their own end, ended up taking a sack, and then got a 15-yard penalty on top of that before the quarterback didn't like the way he was touched down after he fell down to basically end the play and lose the yardage, turn the ball over on downs. Shelby ended up getting it on like a 23-yard line. That's how the Golden Lions set up the go-ahead score, and then basically from that point on, it was all Shelby.
I didn't hear that final situation with Olympic. What I did hear is some comments from former assistant coach of Shelby, Jeff Jones, and he was talking about some things you talked about on the program last week. If Shelby cuts out the turnovers, gets back to smart football, and their quarterback leads the way, they're going to be in there with anybody, and that's what they did down the stretch in that football game. Tristan Tate, great running, back to the running game, and Farmer just being smart. And again, guys, that was a big night because think about it. Crest over Catholic, Shelby on the road at a previously unbeaten Olympic team. That was a great night for Cleveland County football over Charlotte football.
So Shelby wins that one 35-24 over Olympic, gets the Golden Lions to 2-2. So Burns and Shelby both get to 2-2. Crest stays 3-0. Kings Mountain had the week off. They are 2-1. And we'll talk about all 4 of them coming up this Friday night with their next games on the schedule, and we'll do that when we come back. You're watching Armchair Quarterback.
Tune in to Senior Moments here on C19 TV. I am Jackie Sibley Newton with Terabella Assisted Living. Whether you are a senior planning for your own future or helping someone make decisions, Senior Moments has got information to share. We talk about the wealth of services, activities, and healthy living options available to you here in our area. That's Senior Moments on C19 and also on C19.tv.
Probably not. I have to study for my exams next week, and my dad would kill me.
I can't make it. I've got a big game tomorrow night. I want to make sure I'm in good shape.
No, I'm good. I don't want to get in trouble. My parents would kill me.
Nah, I gotta fill out scholarship applications.
Everyone has at least one good reason to stay away from drugs and alcohol. Find your reason today and get back to enjoying life.
Welcome back in for Armchair Quarterback. I'm David Allen, joined as always Coach Guy Suttle and Paul Foster sitting in this week. Rob Root on the health recovery train. We look to see Rob back with us here in the next couple of weeks or so, but he was on the radio doing the Crest game Friday night, so it was good to hear him back on the radio. And of course, we'll be glad to have him back in the studio in a couple of more weeks. So again, speedy recovery to our buddy Rob Root. Talking about now our high school teams as we move forward into conference play, and look at that. Highland Tech is 3-0, and Burns will beat them by 40. At least. And y'all, I mean, I say it every year. We've been saying it for 4 years. Hopefully Burns and Shelby on the way out of this conference. But this is a segment of the season now for Burns and Shelby both that are going to play 4 consecutive games against 1A opponents, and taking nothing away from 1A football, but they don't have any business playing Cleveland County teams, and that's going to be ugly Friday night. Coach.
Yeah, I mean, it's again, it's apples to apples and oranges to oranges, and this is not even close to that. I mean, I don't know how to explain it, and it's nobody's fault. It's not Burns' fault. It's not Highland Tech's fault. It's what the state has done. But you're right, and you know, Highland Tech is going to be fired up. But like I say, I think it'll be short-lived.
Well, and they will be better, Paul, because, I mean, honestly, they hadn't won a game in 4 years, and now they're 3-0. So they got to be better than they have been, regardless of who they're playing. I mean, I'm assuming they're not playing a middle school schedule. So they've beaten 3 other high school football teams. Now, they're not going to beat Burns, and I don't care what anybody says. But it could be at least more competitive than the games we've seen against Highland Tech for the last 3 years.
I certainly hope so for everybody that's at that game and for the Highland Tech following for sure. But, you know, the first thing that caught our attention when the graphic was up there on the screen, 3-0, and that's just remarkable to see. So that's a good step for this team. I hope they can at least go in there and not turn over the ball and hang with Burns for a little bit, at least make it interesting through the first quarter. But like you guys said, I think at the end we know how it's going to turn out.
Coach, you're the only one of the 3 of us that has actually been on the sideline, been in the practice huddle throughout the course of the week. What does Coach David Devine and, you know, we'll get to it, but Coach Mike Wilbanks have to do over the next month to keep their kids focused during these games against Highland, Bessemer, Cherryville, and Thomas Jefferson?
It's perfection. He's going to go in, or today when they watch film, they're going to concentrate more on Burns, what Burns, and I'm talking about down to look at your hand. Your hand's not on the ground correctly. I mean, to that point, and hammer them on that until they get it right. They may, if you've got an hour's worth of Burns film, you may watch 2 minutes of Highland Tech. They are going to, and I say they, Shelby is included in this conversation. Whatever we can do to perfect our craft is what we are going to do over the next month.
Well, sorry, Burns faithful and Burns coaching staff, if we're not helping you out anything by saying you're going to win by 40, but that'll be that one on Friday night. Meanwhile, Crest will take on Ashbrook. This is the first of the Big South Conference games for Crest and Kings Mountain as they get into conference play this week. And, there's Ashbrook at 3-0. Now, that's a little bit different 3-0, Paul. 3-0 Ashbrook versus a 3-0 Highland Tech. There's a little bit of difference there.
There certainly is. And let me say this, from being around a lot of Crest games in years past, I even remember in some of those Roy Kirby teams where, Crest was, selected to win the conference, selected to, probably go a long way in the playoffs. I remember when Ashbrook would come into Crest, not just Crest going to Ashbrook, and some Ashbrook teams that were not undefeated. It's just something about Ashbrook always gives Crest a tough game. So I hope everybody at Crest will just be reminded the guys about that. And I mean, you're playing an undefeated football team going into this week, so that's the first thing that stands out. But again, this is a game you can't overlook. You've got to be ready.
Well, Coach, and we said in the previous couple shows that usually there's one other team in the Big South outside of South Point, outside of Crest, outside of Kings Mountain, that from year to year will step up and be the tough team to beat in the conference. It could be Ashbrook this year.
Yeah, I don't think it's Forest View or Stuart Kramer or any of those. So I do think it's Ashbrook. Going back to what Paul was talking about, in 2010, Coach Barnes, not a first-time head coach, first head coach, his turn or that time at Crest, and Coach Hill, it was his first time at Ashbrook. They were, both of those coaches came in, and Ashbrook beat Crest at Ashbrook. And lo and behold, meet in the first round of the playoffs of 2010, and Crest throws a screen pass for 80 yards to score to survive that game, and goes on and plays in the state championship. So there's implications every time Crest and Ashbrook line up against each other, in that it's going to be a good, hard-fought game. It's a tough opening game in your conference schedule.
Well, no doubt about the fact that this is the only game from the 4 that'll be in Cleveland County at this point that will feature 2 undefeated teams, because Crest, the only team in Cleveland County that's still unbeaten, and there Ashbrook is as well. So that one ought to be a good one on Friday night. So that'll be over at the home of the Green Wave. So you might want to go check that one out. But that's Crest at Ashbrook. Now we go to Kings Mountain after the week off. Kings Mountain's got homecoming this week against Hunter Huss, and I'm going to tell you what, I've got to talk to Coach Bridges about picking your homecoming matchup, because, I mean, that's where you're looking for Cherryville or Thomas Jefferson. You're not looking for Hunter Huss. Hunter Huss always athletic, Coach.
Oh, yeah.
And that could be a tough game for Kings Mountain on Friday night.
A difference between a Hunter Huss team going deep into the playoffs and a Hunter Huss team just making the playoffs is usually the 5 guys up front. They're going to have the skill. They're going to have the speed. It's whether or not they have the linemen up front that can handle the defensive front of Kings Mountain. And that's still a strong, strong point for Kings Mountain, is that defensive front.
Well, and on offense, Paul, Kings Mountain really got it going running game-wise. Josiah Hill with 4 touchdowns the last time out. Big Tex Vaughn that I think he got offered at Carolina on Saturday, so congratulations to him.
Yeah.
He's got I think he had 160 yards receiving in the last matchup. So Kings Mountain has got some studs that they can rely on offense to get through Hunter Huss on Friday night. But that should be a challenge for the Mounties on Friday night.
Yeah, I talked to somebody in Gastonia not long ago that said this Hunter Huss team plays really hard. And they do believe that they can maybe accomplish some things this season, take a step forward, so to speak, and come out a little bit better than they have been. But you mentioned some of the weapons. If Hill's doing his thing in the running game, and say that does get brought down a little bit. Armstrong going to Vaughn through the air, and Armstrong's already thrown for around, give or take, 600 yards on the season. So, they got a lot of weapons. We'll see what happens.
Coach, and one of the things maybe that's not considered as much, I mean, Shelby and Crest being so close to each other, a lot of times you have transfer back and forth. You got kids that play for Crest one year, then play for Shelby the next, and that kind of thing. That seems to have started taking place a whole lot more with Hunter Huss and Kings Mountain, which are proximity-wise very close to one another.
Right.
And you got kids that, even though they're 2 different counties, you got kids that may play at Kings Mountain and go to Hunter Huss and vice versa. So there's that familiarity as well that you might not have with some of the other schools.
Yeah, I had not thought about that with you and the. I had not thought about that proximity and some of those transfers coming over. But that's right. Was it 4 or 6 athletes that have come from Hunter Huss that are now attending Kings Mountain? So there will be some familiar faces lined up across from each other.
So Kings Mountain at home, again, homecoming on Friday for Kings Mountain, parade uptown on Friday afternoon. And I don't know, they may have put me in charge of that. I don't know why, but I am. So come on
I know
out.
why.
Come on out and see the parade, and then stick around for the homecoming game over in Kings Mountain on Friday. Final game of the week, there you see it, Shelby at Cherryville. I told you guys before we even started, the biggest news out of this game and this week is for the first time since Shelby entered this conference, Paul, Cherryville has a JV team, so Shelby's going to get to play a JV game on Thursday night against the Ironmen.
Hey, that's exciting. I'm so glad to hear that for Cherryville. They, have a brand new coach, which is a former Crest guy, and they've, they got the one win. I think it was the first one of the season. It's gone downhill since. This is not going to help them to play Shelby on Friday night.
No, and Coach, we beat this horse to death, but obviously the Golden Lions just far superior. And should, again, like we said against Burns and Highland Tech, this should be a 40-point game at least.
Yeah, it's just too many weapons. I know that Coach Bowman he's going to have his Iron Men pumped up, and we're playing Shelby. I've been in this game. I've coached in this game. All those things that a coach can say, Coach Bowman's going to use those, but it's not going to last long. I don't mean that ugly. I just mean it as a matter of fact that Shelby just has too many weapons, and not to put Cherryville down. There's just a difference.
Absolutely. All right, so Shelby at Cherryville. Here's the rest of the games: Burns at Highland Tech, Ashbrook at Crest, Hunter Huss at Kings Mountain, and Shelby at Cherryville on Friday night. So pick a game, go out and see it, support local athletics. Remember, I don't know that we say that on this show at all, but I'll say it. Football drives the entire athletic program at all 4 of these county schools. It's not because it's more important or more kids play it. It is simply a fact. In Cleveland County, you going out to support the football teams on Friday night pays for the wrestlers to be able to get on a bus in February and go somewhere to wrestle. It pays for the swim teams to do that. It pays for the entire athletic program. So your support of these 4 football teams on Friday nights supports all the kids at those schools that are in the athletic program, whether they play football or not. And I think that gets lost on people a lot of times. And as a former longtime high school principal, I'm telling you, it's important for you to go spend your $7, $8, $10, whatever case may be, on Friday night, and go get in that long line at the concession stand and load up there too while you're at it. So that's my pitch for this week for supporting the Cleveland County Schools athletic teams. We're only got that 5 minutes left in the show, but we got let's talk about these college games. Appalachian, they survived down at East Carolina 21-19. They've got South Alabama this week. Any thoughts on App?
I think that they've got a great shot at beating South Alabama. It's going to help them move much faster, and by playing East Carolina, it sped up the game for them, because we know what kind of teams that East Carolina puts on the field, and the speed of the game should have come to Appalachian, getting them ready for this weekend.
Well, and obviously it was good for them to bounce back after the beating they took at Clemson. Speaking of Clemson, the Wolfpack goes down to Clemson on Saturday, Paul. That's going to be a good football game.
I think it will be. We know what Clemson, as you just said, did to App State. It was also Clemson coming off that Georgia loss where they really felt like they were humiliated. Of course, a lot of teams are going to be by that #1 Georgia team. But I'm interested. I want to see how the Wolfpack does, or is this going to be a big win for Clemson?
Well, let me say this. South Carolina beat Kentucky by 30. Georgia beat Clemson by 30. And then Georgia beat Kentucky by 1. So I know what the South Carolina fans, they're doing that math in their head, and they're saying, we're going to beat Clemson by 30. All right, cool your jets. There's a long way before that one comes up. JMU at North Carolina. I thought, this one, JMU's a little bit down, I think, this year, so Carolina should be favored. Carolina has found the third quarterback now, Coach.
That's right.
And my understanding is they're going to use both quarterbacks moving forward.
And I think they have to, because that's the only way that they're going to know when the going gets tough, who they're going to count on, or who's going to go under center, or who's going to be in the gun. But yeah, they did. It helped them. It's going to help them again this week to play both of those quarterbacks and figure it out.
Paul, new ACC member Cal, as in Cal Berkeley. I know that's hard to believe, but they're playing at Florida State. Could Florida State possibly be 0-4 after this coming weekend?
I think anything's possible. I never would have thought they would have been 0-3. I thought at least, Memphis is a good football program, but I thought Florida State surely, they're going to get this behind them. I now think, who knows, maybe even Cal.
Biggest game on the docket, in my opinion, is Tennessee and Oklahoma. That one, if Lewis Carpenter was still around, he would say that one's going to be a slobber knocker on Saturday. And how about Gardner-Webb? Gardner-Webb is 0-3. They had UNC Charlotte on the ropes. It was Charlotte on the ropes. I know they don't like the UNC designation anymore. They had Charlotte on the ropes. Mm-hmm. They barely lost to Wofford. They barely lost to JMU. They now barely lost to Charlotte. They've got Presbyterian on actually a Thursday night game, I believe. Gardner-Webb possibly going to get that first win of the season.
I think it's very possible, more than possible, that they're going to beat Presbyterian on Thursday. That's 2 1-point losses and a
6-point loss.
A 6-point loss, or certainly a conversion on fourth down may have tilted it one way or the other in the JMU game. So, it's going to be a win for them. I think, just like we've talked about a 1-2 Cleveland County team playing a 3-0, and I don't know what Presbyterian's record is, but I think that you can honestly say that Gardner-Webb is battle tested. They just need to finish the game.
And Paul, new coaching staff, the whole, they're 0-3, so that's tough, but they could be 3-0.
Yeah, head coach, Coach Reisert is the new man at Gardner-Webb in his very first year. Look what he's already doing. They're competing. And I think they're going to get that first win coming up with this Presbyterian game.
All right, so we got a minute and a half, so let's just hey, look, first of all, one thing I'll say about the Panthers, the Saints whipped them last week, but the Saints whipped my Cowboys yesterday about the same amount of whipping. So we'll say that. But also, Bryce Young got benched today, so he is not going to start next week. Dalton, no, he's not the Red Rocket. That's Carson Palmer. But anyway, Dalton,
still got red hair.
Andy Dalton's going to start for the Panthers on Sunday. I'm not sure what good that does, but that's what's going to happen.
Unless it's a teachable moment.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that it could be. Nothing against Andy Dalton. I think they had to make a little bit of a change, just simply to slow everything down, let Bryce stand and watch another quarterback. And like I say, he's going to have the earpiece. He's going to know which game or which play is being called, and see how Andy handles this situation. And maybe the coach the quarterback coach is going to be in his ear. So it could be simply a learning situation, but I just don't see this being a long-term fix.
I wish somebody with the Panthers had a time machine, could go back, bring in C.J. Stroud. That's what I wanted all along, and maybe this discussion would be different.
Well, I'll tell you what, we don't have time to talk about that because we're out of time. Well, that's all for this week. We'll see you next week right here on Armchair Quarterback.